So in this video, we're going to go over which classes are the best performing in PvP and why. Mainly, this is going to be focused on open world PvP 1 versus 1. So it's not going to be as much group PvP oriented. This is going to be open world. You meet somebody else in the open world and you have to fight them over a mining node or something like that. And it could also be in a duel scenario. So let's just start off with the best of the best, at least for dual scenarios, which I would consider to be the Warlocks. These are extremely strong. They have a lot of utility. You can sacrifice your Void Walker to get a massive shield, and Warlocks are just strong. They don't have much mobility, but if you have the correct talents and if you are ready, prepared for being attacked, then you have a great chance. Once you have your Death Coil and you can sacrifice your demon, then you are really, really strong. And they scale incredibly well into late game. They are one of the strongest duelers. Once you have all of your gear, Warlocks are one of the best of the best, in my opinion. And actually, right after the Warlock, these are not strong while leveling, but at end game, once you have gear, these are more gear requiring or more gear dependent than the Warlock. So at early levels, I'd probably put them down on A or B tier. But once you get gear as a Shadow Priest, you are extremely tanky. It's insane how they are known as the face melters, right? You put a dot on you and basically you have to engage or else you're gonna die slowly. So of course you can always run away or try to run away and then heal up. But if he has a nifty stopwatch or he has just something that can chase you down, then even as a hunter you're not gonna survive for long if he's geared. And when I'm talking about gear, this is around rank 14 gear, like rank 13, 14 gear. That's where Shadow Priests are incredibly strong and hard to kill. And next up on the top tier, I would probably say mages. They are just all in a all-around strong class. Maybe you could argue that they're less strong than Warlock and Shadow Priest. I think at least if the mage is to duel Shadow Priest and a Warlock and they're equally geared and they're equally skilled, then the Shadow Priest and the Warlock would probably win against a mage. But there are some mages that are just, you know, if you are really good at mage, there's a high skill ceiling to playing a mage. And if you are really good at mage, he'll be running circles around Warlocks and Priests, and he'll dominate pretty much everyone in PvP. So a really good mage is definitely up here and can actually be all the way up here. But equal skill, equal gear, all else, then usually this is the setup. You have the Warlock first, then you have the Priest, and then you have the mage. Mages are a lot harder to play perfectly and to play well than Warlock and Priest. So there's a higher skill cap to mages. Priest is probably among these three here, the ones with the lowest skill cap in terms of how to fight in PvP and, you know, basically be good. It's a lot easier to be good on a Shadow Priest than it is to be good on a mage or a Warlock. And I think right after that, but on the next tier, we have the Rogue. Rogues are also pretty strong. They are really a counter to Warlocks. They can also be a counter to Shadow Priests in a way if they really play the cheeky way with sapping into the... Like, if they play with all their cooldowns, basically just making sure that the Priest doesn't really get a chance to put up his power word shields and just completely control the fight. Usually that's not going to happen as much in open world PvP, but in a duel scenario, that's going to happen. And then you in those cases, you'd see that the Rogue usually beats Warlocks and Shadow Priests and struggles maybe a little bit more with mages. So this one can go both ways, mage versus Rogue. But once we consider all other classes and how Rogues fare against other classes, then I'm sticking with my choice here that Warlocks and Priests and Mages are the top because they just do well against all other classes. And after the Rogue, I'd say Druid. Some would argue because the Druid is probably, next to the Mage, is probably the class with the highest skill ceiling in the game. If you're extremely good as a Druid, you could argue he's even up here, better than the Mage, better than the Rogue, and beats most other classes as well. It's just really rare to see such a skilled Druid, and it also requires really specific gear. Like Druid has some, usually what I see is they mixing a lot of different gear. It's not as easy to get the gear that the Druid needs to perform at such a level. But if you are really skilled and if you are really good at Druid, he can jump up a ton. He'll still struggle against casters, I think, mostly. Bear form is just really strong against melee DPSers. And with all the roots and stuff, hiding, and just playing as a druid is more of a fight of maybe, I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but a fight of attrition in a way, and just outsmarting your opponents with kiting and roots, and they're annoying, really, really annoying to play against a good druid. After that, I think we have the hunter. I think hunter are really strong in specific fights. In duel scenario, hunter struggles because they are not really able to kite in the same way as they are in the open world. If the hunter is in the open world and he can just kite endlessly and you have good awareness around you, then you're just using your aspect of the cheetah constantly and no one is going to touch you. Like the only problems you're gonna have is maybe a shadow priest, and he'll put a dot on you and you'll just die from the dot before you can actually kill the shadow priest. But that's on a really high levels of gear. During leveling, I'd say hunters amongst rogues are probably the strongest in world PvP, and especially at lower levels, hunters as beast mastery is really, really strong in world PvP, open PvP. Good hunters, they know positioning over anything else. It's really difficult to spot a good hunter from a bad hunter. The only way that you can spot it is basically you won't be able to touch a good hunter. They'll keep their distance. They'll always be standing in a way that it's gonna be hard for you to reach them. But it's really subtle, the difference between good and bad hunters. It's really difficult to spot. It's really a lot about awareness around you and positioning. I've played hunter most of my life. It's my main character. It's the one that I'm best at. I participated in the Duelist League in Classic. I won half of my fights, and hunter is really good against rogue. I'd say hunters and versus mage can go both ways, but usually mage will win. Usually a shadow priest will win against a hunter. Hunter versus warlock can also go somewhat both ways, but it's leaning towards the warlock, definitely. Against the druid, because of the fear that the hunter has and the ability to constantly reset fights and the weak dodge that the druid has, this one can also go both ways. If the druid is really, really, really skilled, then he will just out attrition a hunter and stay in bear form all constantly, and it will be really, really hard for the hunter to even do any damage to the druid. But in most cases, I say most druids that I fight, I win against the druid. Against mages, for me, it's half and half. Against rogues, I usually win against most rogues. So that's a little bit about the hunter, a little bit more in depth. That's the class that I know the most about. And then, in my opinion, we have the shaman. Elemental shaman, this is, if we're talking about enhancement shaman, then he's down here. He is really, really weak. Enhancement shaman really needs some help to be strong. But elemental shaman is strong. And he also has his weakness against mages, against silence, against interrupt. Shamans don't have any hard CC. So it's just a weaker hunter, in my opinion, but with spell damage. So in that sense, he has some burstiness. Mostly strong in if you can get a nade off, if you can get a rocket helmet into someone, and then you place your Fire Nova, you power up with your Elemental Fury, isn't that what's called? I think Elemental Mastery, Elemental Fury or something. And then you just Chain Lightning, Earth Shock, both crit, plus the Fire Nova totem. Usually that's going to one-shot somebody if you have enough spell power. So in that sense, he's also quite gear dependent, because that's your only real gimmick. You have this 3-minute on-demand burst window where you can just pick somebody off in a duel, or you can pick someone off in a battleground, and then after that you don't really have that much. You have great damage. So if you're allowed to stay in the background in a battleground and just pump your lightning bolts and chain lightning, then you're really, really formidable. But as soon you're really easy to stop, right? That's the thing. You don't really have any escape tools in the same way that a hunter has, or a druid has, or a rogue has, or a mage for that matter. You're really stuck in that position, in the same way that a priest and a warlock is pretty much stuck in their position. But a warlock is just has more survivability and has some fear and has some things that they can CC the target with. The same for the priest, and they are also really beefy and hard to kill. Unlike the shaman, he's a lot easier to kill. It's a lot easier to interrupt him. If you silence a shaman, that's all his spells, because every single spell the shaman has is nature school. That's what they tried to do. That's why I think they, in Season of Discovery, they gave shamans lava bursts, so that if the shaman is locked out of his nature spells, he's not just sitting there not being able to do anything. They can still actually do something, which is cast some fire spells instead. And I think in that sense they did a good job. They saw what the issues was, and also he needed enhancement shaman really needs some sort of freedom, and they gave that in Season of Discovery as well. not to talk about Season of Discovery too much, because they, of course, they went way overboard with the additions, but some of them were okay, especially for the shamans. I think they did a lot of things correct with what the shamans needed to perform well in PvP. And now we come to which shall we pick, the paladin or the warrior? I think I'm gonna go with the warrior first. For me, if the warrior is alone, I have an easy time on any class pretty much, except for shamans maybe. But warriors are just weak. If they are alone, you really need a high level of gear to beat anyone. I say maybe against the rogue, that one can go both ways. If a druid is really skilled, I don't really think that the warrior stands much of a chance with the roots and stuff. Against the hunter, it can also go both ways if the hunter is bad, but usually against warriors, I win, I say 8 out of 10 fights I win on a hunter. Even if the warrior, he gap closes me, I can just melee him down. The turns, if I have the turns up, that's gonna help a lot against the warrior. And of course, warlocks, priests, and mages are just gonna run laps around the warrior. It's just, he doesn't have a chance. Once the warrior is in the battleground and he has a pocket healer, a shaman or a paladin healer, those are probably the best for the warrior, because a priest healer, if you shield a warrior with a power shield, he has trouble generating rage. He's not going to generate as much rage, and he lacks the freedom that a paladin gives, or the wind fury that a shaman gives. So that's why a shaman or a paladin healer is the best for a warrior as a pocket healer, and probably mostly the paladin, right? Because bubble and freedom, that's just going to make a much greater impact than Wind Fury in PvP, because what you want to do is CC the warrior and slow him and stuff like that, and then Wind Fury is not going to really help a lot in that case. But then that's where the paladin has more tools. And then we have the paladin, I think, next to the warrior. As a retribution paladin, they are really gear dependent. They can perform great. I've seen Esfand and I've seen their Krova, and I know they are great paladins, but they are not, they are far in between, right? They're not your average player. Of course, we are not talking about average players. This is just equal skill, equal gear. And I think if the paladin gets really geared, I'd probably move him up here in front of the shaman. But this one can go both ways. Against the warrior, I'd say paladin wins. Against the hunter, if he can kite, then the paladin loses, because he can just keep kiting. But if it's in a duel scenario, this can go both ways, I think. Against the druid, I'd say the druid wins. Druid has more sustainability, has more outplay potential. Against the rogue, can go both ways. All the crits will, if he is a reckoning paladin, he can basically one-shot rogue if he gets a stun in. Against the mage wins, and I say warlock, priest, and mage are still the winners against the paladin. But I think his place is down here, close to the warrior in strength, usually, I think, yeah. So that's pretty much it for PvP. This is how I see vanilla balance in PvP. I know it's a hot topic, and maybe people will disagree with me on some of the things, but I think this is overall, like, most people would agree with something similar to this. So yeah, take this into consideration when you pick your class. If you're really into PvP, then consider your options. That's it for this video, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like the type of content that I'm doing here, and then I will see you guys in the next video.